My name is Mukesh Kumar. I'm from Microsoft. I'm an engineering group manager within Azure Data, and my team is focused on uh, accelerating and unblocking customers from who are undergoing SQL modernization, or they are undergoing Mainframe or Oracle or any other non-SQL data platform modernization onto Azure Data. With me, I have Raj Pochiraju. Raj, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mukesh. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Pochiraju. I'm a principal program manager in Azure SQL Data Group, and my team's core responsibility is to product manage the tools and services that really help you to do the seamless database migrations to Azure. And today, I'm going to give you some deep dive into some of the tools that our team is directly responsible for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Raj. So I'm switching to the presentation. And first of all, welcome everyone to this wonderful event. In this session, we are going to talk about app modernization and migration from using data migration tools and leveraging Azure SQL platform, and how really the end-to-end experience looks like, right? As Raj said, he's going to focus on the live demo, demonstrating this end-to-end. And what I'm going to focus in this session is to make you aware of Microsoft's and Azure Data's strategy and investments towards really enabling this end-to-end migration and modernization, right? Not just in the form of core products, but also in the form of tools and automation, and incorporate all the enterprise learnings that we are harvesting from other customer engagements. So as uh, Microsoft in the last few years, right, have been working really hard with its customers and partners to and then realize that by just giving product, just giving a service and expecting our customers and esteemed partners will be successful, uh, is really not true. Like we have understood that with the tools and with the products, we also have to offer ourselves to be really part of the process with our customer and partners, and that's where partners and customers now have direct access to engineering resources from various groups within Microsoft. Many of you might be knowing teams like Fast Track, SQL Ninja, and there are many other customer-facing teams. And I want to make sure that you understand it's like very explicit and well thought through investment from Microsoft side to, in addition to the migration tools and services like DMS, DMA, Azure Migrate, and SSMA in the complete migration space, we are continuously investing on. Okay, and with this combination, what we are also trying to do is um, uh, from these engagements, we are harvesting learnings and we are feeding it back and open sourcing it with the community through our database migration guide called datamigration.microsoft.com. And it's very popular. I would request that all of you bookmark this URL, have an offline look, and reach out to us if you have any questions or suggestions on this. Now, the tools and services are of no use if they really don't go and help you with a market trend, right? If they don't help you with faults that our customers have. And by the way, these trends and faults are something that we are continuously harvesting from all the customer engagements we are directly doing with our customers and partners. And then tools usage in a specific migration phase is very, very critical. And we want to make sure through this slide that you understand Microsoft's strategy is starting from discovery till post migration. And we are striving to really bring more and more automation like what we have in the assessment phase in the form of DMA, what we have in the form of DMA to help you accelerate the object and schema migration, one-time data migration. Similarly, tools like DMS, right, where you can do object and schema migration, one-time data migration at a scale. Then ADF and SSIS, which are very instrumental in one-time data migration and then also enabling you to achieve data replication and sync use cases. I'm not going to go through each and every trends and keywords because these are self-explanatory. Many of you run through this on day-to-day business. but wanted to make sure that you understand how Microsoft's strategy is panning across. Now, this is a very interesting slide. We thought it would be useful for this audience. Is when we say we have accelerators, we have tools, we have services, it's a common question that we are facing. Okay, quantify how really you are accelerating as opposed to AWS and GCP, right? So what we have started doing, working with our SI partners and the customers, is that across different typical migration phases, we are we have started articulating like how much percentage of effort we are really solving. So if folks in this event who come from global SI system integrator space, they would understand that these typical steps. These steps are often have a percentage of allocation for overall effort of the project for the migration. And what we are saying is we are seeing somewhere between X to Y% of effort saving as and when customers are leveraging our first party tools and services like DMA, DMS, SSMA, etc. And similarly, with the engineering white glove, this engineering part of resources who are working with you are also bringing tons of IPs and the best practices, right? And the assets that we have used to accelerate and unblock customer engagements elsewhere. So just wanted to make sure that you understand how Microsoft is thinking towards this end-to-end migration journey. And with that, for a live demo of an application undergoing end-to-end migration, which has .NET as the front end and middleware, and SQL Server as the underlying database system, I am going to request Raj Pochiraju to take over this presentation and get us through that demo. Raj, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mukesh. Let me share my desktop before I go to the demo here. Sounds good. So before I go to the demo, I want to really recap what Mukesh is really told in terms of the Microsoft investments in the tools area. So we have a bunch of tools that you are seeing on the screen that really help you to take the migration journey. And before I go to the tools, I want to introduce to you the specific sources and targets that we support from migrating from the specific sources like SQL Server starting from 2005 all the way up to 2019 that you can migrate to Azure SQL DB, managed instance or SQL servers which are running on the VM. You can also migrate from Oracle Sybase DB2 to respective Azure targets. We also have a support for open source databases like MySQL and Postgres that you can really migrate to the Azure as well. And we also have a support from MongoDB to Cosmos DB. And not only that, we really support you migrating from the on-premises environments. We also support you to migrating from other clouds like AWS and Google. So with that, if you really look at Mukesh really articulated the migration journey, various phases in the migration journey like discovery, assessment, and as well as the migrations. So these are the bunch of these tools like Azure Migrate, DMA, combination of these tools that you are going to be using to do the actual migrations to the Azure. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to introduce to you before I go to the demo the existing environment or existing application that exists in the on-premises data center, which is in a private data center. And my goal here is to migrate this particular application to Azure. So I have an application which is running in a web service, is being hosted on a VMware server here. And then my database is also hosted in an on-premises environment on a SQL Server 2017 instance. My goal here is to migrate these two, the application layer and as well as the database layer to Azure. And then now the immediate question comes, like Mukesh mentioned in the FUD factors, where do I really land? Am I going to be landing onto infrastructure as a service, or am I going to be landing onto platform as a service? Am I going to do a true lift and shift migration, or am I going to do the am I going to be doing some kind of refactor to do these migrations, right? So I'm hoping that the tools and services that I'm going to use today are going to help me to land onto a specific Azure platform. At the same time, also help me to migrate these assets to the specific Azure targets to begin with. So with that, let me go to my environment where I'm going to introduce you my application environment here. As you see, this is a wide world imports online ordering system that is being hosted in the on-premises private data center. This is simply where you can really come and really order your parts for your automobile systems um, and all that stuff, right? So this is the application which is being hosted on the on-prem. My goal here is that I'm going to be migrating this application to Azure, and at the same time, I'm also going to be migrating to the database. And at the end of the migration, we're going to change the connection string of the application pointing to a new target on the Azure, and then we'll make sure that the application is going to come up and running on the Azure itself. So that's the goal that we have today. So to achieve that goal, the very first thing that I wanted to do is I want to go and then discover my environment at first and find out the app dependencies so that I really understand which servers that I need to migrate, which components that I need to migrate, so that I don't really leave any components on the on-premises itself. For that reason, I'm going to use a service called Azure Migrate service on the portal. So I log into the portal here. I'm going to go into the Azure Migrate service here. This Azure Migrate service is a fully managed service on the Azure, which really provides a unified migration experience across your servers, databases, and as well as applications. So this is a single place where you can really have all your migration needs really met. So at first, I'm going to go to the servers, and then um, the very first thing is that I need to really create a project here. And then when I create the project, the next step is to do the discovery. So I already created a project here. So let me go to a project that I already created here for the wide world imports here. So I'm going to be switching to that project here. So there are three servers that are discovered here already, and you also see that there is an assessment is performed. But before I go to show the discovery results and as well as the assessment results, I want to make sure that I show you how to discover actually, right? So if you look at the discover, click on the discover functionality here, it simply comes up with and a few instructions that you need to go through to enable the discovery components in your on-premises. Typically for a VMware, you just need to download a template which really help you to provision a VMware VM in your on-premises environment that consists of all the components that are required, all the discovery components and also all the data collection components that are required to make the discovery happen. So these are, you just need to follow through these instructions, and then the discovery is going to go and up and running, right? So which I did already the configuration in my appliance box. Now I'm going to go to look at the number of servers that are being discovered. Is there are three servers that are discovered. So I'm going to click on those three servers here, and then it gives me the database server, which is hosting the database for me. And I also have an application server, which is hosting the web service for the wide world imports application that we are migrating today. And there is also another database server, which also provides a campaign database for this application as well. So at this point, I really want to migrate my application and database, and then I'm going to be migrating the campaign database at a later point of time. And in order to migrate these applications, we also need to find out the dependencies actually. So even before I decide that I want to migrate these components, the best practice is that you wanted to really go and then look at those dependencies that Azure Migrate discovery component really fetched for you. So it really gives you a good dependency matrix here, saying that your database server is sitting in the middle, and then which are the connections that are coming from to the database server, the client applications, and at the same time which connections that it is making with what servers and what specific ports and everything. You will get a very detailed look at the entire application as a whole, so that you exactly understand which of these servers that you need to migrate, and at the same time which of these components that you also need to migrate. That way you will have a comprehensive view of the entire state that you need to migrate for a given workload that you are trying to migrate. Right. So with that, I'm going to be, the next step is that I really want to find out what would be the cost it's going to be if I migrate to the cloud, right? So for that reason, I'm going to go back to my assessments. I already create the next step. Usually after the discovery is done, that you want to create an assessment, but I already created an assessment here. And then let's look at the assessment results here. Um, at first, it is going to give you a Azure readiness assessment report. It is saying that all these three different servers that you identified are ready to migrate to Azure. And then it also provides you a monthly estimate in terms of migrating these servers to the Azure, so that you will have some kind of a ballpark number, how much it is going to cost, once you start hosting this environment into the Azure. It gives both the compute cost and as well as the storage cost as well. So it's a good way that you can really find out the costs even before you do the migrations. So far what we did is we did the discovery, we find out the application dependencies so that we really understand which servers that we want to migrate. And the third step is that we really look into the cost and then everything, how much it is going to cost migrating to the Azure. Now, at first, I'm going to be targeting migrating my databases. For doing that, the uh, the very first thing that I need to do is I want to assess my databases to see how ready these databases migrate into Azure to begin with, right? For that reason, I'm going to use a tool called Azure Database Migration Assistant tool, which is a desktop tool that you can really download from Microsoft Download Center, which is free. You just need to download and install in your on-premises environment. Once you do that, the first step is that you would perform an assessment, that the tool that I already got installed. The assessment experience is going to look like very simple here. You click on the assessment and give some name to it. And then you typically pick up a source type and the target type where you want to really migrate your databases, and you create a project. There are a couple of options here: check database compatibility and check feature parity. Basically, database compatibility is something that we look into your schema and find out if there are any objects that are currently in use that might be using some legacy syntax that might not be supported on the Azure to begin with. So we really pinpoint you those objects to you. And then we also provide a mitigating steps too. And then feature parity is something that we look at all the surface level features at the instance level. For example, SQL Server agent jobs. Maybe you are using some SSIS packages to do some kind of integration tasks. We look into those features and see if those features are supported on the Azure or not. If not, we'll provide you some kind of alternative recommendations as well. So you pick those two options here, and then you just connect to the source environment where your database servers are being hosted. Either you can assess all the databases, or you can really pick and choose some of those databases that you want to assess, and then you can add more sources as well. Like in case if you want to really group together multiple SQL instances into a single assessment, you can do that as well by clicking the add sources here. But then you just click on the start assessment button here. So usually the assessment will take some time depending on how large your schema is. So what I'm going to be doing instead is I'm going to simply showcase an assessment that I already did for you. And then this is the assessment that you really want to take a look at it before you decide to migrate. Um, at first, I looked into the feature parity options that I talked about, where it tells you there is at least one database which is named called DB multiple logs. Might not be able to migrate to the managed instance because it has got multiple log files. So managed instance only allows you to have a single log file, a sequential single log file. So in case if you have multiple log files, you may want to restructure those log files before you start migrating to it. But I'm not really worried about this database at this point because my application is not really using this database. So I'm going to be moving on to the compatibility issues here. Um, and then, for example, if you look at HR database, it really gives you the specific objects. In this case, it is a stored procedure with a dbo.employee office that might be using some kind of legacy syntax that is not being supported migrating to Azure. It also tells you how to fix it, actually recommendations, how to convert that non-ANSI join into an ANSI join. So that way, it really gives you the specific objects that are going to be impacted upfront. So it's pretty good idea for you to take a look at it, this assessment and all that stuff to find out, whether databases are ready or not. And some of the other databases, they don't have any issues. They're ready to migrate to the Azure. So that way, it really gives you a instance level readiness and as well as the DB level readiness for you. But at the same time, if you have one or two databases, it's much easier for you to find out which database is ready and which database is not ready by looking at each individual of databases. But imagine that you have hundreds of databases and you really want to find out which are the low hanging fruits that you can really migrate with less effort. This particular activity can be very daunting, right? For that reason, what we did is, again, we gave an option here that you can really assess as many databases as you want using the DMA tool, or we also provided a command line option here that you can really use to automate. to run the assessment across thousands of databases that you have, and then start uploading those results to the Azure Migrate. Remember Azure Migrate, I told a unified migration experience service that you can really upload these results to the Azure Migrate by selecting the Azure and then subscription and all the stuff. Once you upload those results, then we really summarize all those results and we will give you a data estate centric view. So if you go back to Azure here again to the Azure Migrate, the same Azure Migrate that where we use it to discover and find out the app dependencies. Now I'm going into the database section here, and then here I already upload those results here. It tells me that there are 4 SQL instances that I really assessed, and I'm going to look at those instances here, and then it tells me the instance name and how ready it is migrating to SQL Pass as a solution. So the specific instance, which is the very top instance you are seeing, is here the one which is hosting our the wide world imports application, which is 100% ready to go to SQL Pass. But whereas the other instances like SQL Server 2017 and the one which we just assessed, they're not quite ready. There are like only 87% and 85% ready. So if I really want to understand why it is only 85% ready, then I'm going to click on that. It will take me to the individual databases, and it tells me which databases are ready and which databases are not ready. Out of all these databases, there is only one database which is a DB multiple log files, which we already saw here in your feature parity, where it has a migration blocker. Except that all databases are ready. That is the only reason why you are seeing your readiness is only 87%, not 100%, right? At least this view really gives you a good summary view of which databases are ready, which databases are not ready. So if you look at our database, the database that we are really concerned about, the instance, which one is this? And the database is WWI, which is hosting my wide world imports database, is ready to go to manage instance. So I can go to the manage instance. But the next question comes, next challenge comes is what would be the size of my managed instance, which can really give me a good performance as compared to the performance that I'm really experiencing in my on-premises environment, right? What SKU that I need to go and how much that SKU is going to cost to me. And you really want to find out that information. For that reason, what we did is the same DMA that you kind of use it to do the assessment will also help you to determine the SKU. For example, if you go here in the DMA install program, there is a PowerShell script called SKU recommendations data collection script. Typically, this script really go and then collects all the performance data for to represent your peak workload. And then it will give you the specific performance recommendations to you. So I ran this script already, so that I'm going to show you what recommendation that my DMA gave me in terms of the SKU recommendations. So I go here, and then this is the output of the SKU recommendations that I'm seeing there. And it is telling me for the specific instance that I see here, it is giving me a recommendation of 8 vCore that I need to create with that specific SKU with general purpose tier to meet my performance needs of the on-premises environment. And the beauty of this is also, you can also, for the cost, you can also say that, if you already have a Azure hybrid benefits, then you can really click on this. Then it will give you the monthly estimates cater to the licensing benefits that you are getting from hybrid benefits, right? So that way you would know the ballpark number, how much it is going to cost, right? So once you know your target is managed instance, once you know this is your SKU, the next step that is really is to provision the managed instance before you start migration on the Azure, right? For that reason, we gave you an option here, generate a PowerShell script. It really, you just need to fill subscription ID and all this information. So for example, I give some kind of a dummy values here for now, and then you can go and then click on this box here. It is really gives you a PowerShell script here, this box. And then you can simply use this PowerShell script and run against Azure. It will create you or provision you a managed instance for you. So I kind of use that script, and then I have my managed instance already provisioned here with the same general purpose and 8 vCore. So now until this point, I know my SKU, I provisioned my target. Now my next step is that I really want to migrate my database, and then I want to migrate my application, right? There are 2 tasks are still left for us. So for that, For migrating my database, what I'm going to be using is I'm going to use Azure Database Migration Service, a fully managed service on the Azure, which really help you to migrate your databases with near zero downtime. So I'm going to use that service to do the actual migration. But before you do the database migration, there are three steps that you need to do. At first, you need to create the database migration service first, and then you start your migration saying that this is my source and this is my target, so that you really establish a migration between the source and target for an online migration experience, so that we can start capturing all the changes that are happening in the source, and we keep on applying those changes to the target. And then we can do that as long as until the point where you are ready to do the migration cutover. During the migration cutover, that is the only time that you will really experience a downtime. So let me show you the migration service creation experience here. You just click on the add button here to create, and then you really pick a specific subscription where you want to create, and then pick a resource group that you want to create your service, and then give some name here, and then ESTS, and then the next step is that you really want to find out the size of the DMS service that you want to create. We have two different tiers. One is standard and premium. Standard comes up with three tiers: 1 week core, 2 week core, and then 4 week core. The premium comes with only 4 week core. But with standard, you can only do offline migrations, which means that you might have much more bigger downtime. Whereas with premium, you can do very minimal downtime migration experiences using our online migration experience. And this is also free for the first 6 months. After the 6 months, then only we will charge you, but that also we only charge the compute aspects of it. So pretty much the DMS service is kind of a free service for you. So because I want to do an online migration, I'm going to choose a premium SKU here, and then I'm going to put that on here. And then the next step is I need to choose the network here that will establish a connectivity for the DMS to contact with the source, which is your SQL Server in this case, and the target, which is a managed instance. So you have to pick a specific VNet that really enables the connectivity of that. And I'm going to, the next step is just do a create, right? So usually the DMS service creation will take around 8 to 12 minutes. So for the sake of the time, what I did is I already created a service for us, and then I'm going to use that service here. So this is the homepage of the Azure Database Migration Service. I already created a project for us to establish a migration between on-premises to target. But generally, I also want to showcase how the new migration project experience is going to look like for you. So I'm going to click on the new project. So I'm going to give a test project name here. My source is SQL Server. As I said, we support multiple of other sources as well. My target, we know that I want to migrate to managed instance as per the DMA recommendation that we have seen. So I choose that, and I also mentioned that I'm going to do an online migration to minimize my downtime. So I take that aspect here. In the next step is simply that you need to provide the source information here. So let me copy my source SQL Server from here. And then I'm going to use a SQL authentication to connect to the source environment, and I'm going to put a password on it, and then I'm going to trust my certificate there. Now DMS is really validating your source to make sure that it can be able to connect and all that stuff. Once the connectivity is done, the next step is you want to give an application ID at first, so that the DMS can use that application ID to access the cloud services that we are talking about. So I'm going to give the access ID here. In the next step is I'm going to pick a specific managed instance, which is my target here, which is in this case is the WWI, which is a wide world imports managed instance. And then I'm also going to provide a user ID and password for managed instance as well here. So let me grab that information as well here. Save. Now again, this is doing all the validations to make sure that if there is it seems that there is a login failure here. Let me see if I can fix that issue here. Hopefully that is going to take care of it. Yes. And if there are multiple databases on the instance, you will see those multiple databases here for sure. But because this instance is hosting a single database, you can by select that specific database that you want to migrate. The next step here is this screen looks pretty busy. Let me take some time to explain what this screen really mean actually. So for the to migrate the databases from SQL Server to managed instance, what we do is we use a technology backup and restore technology. So we expect you provide the backups for us from your on-premises environment into a SMB network share. So we expect that you provide full backups and as well as the log backups that we are going to use for the migration. So this is the share where we can find the backups for us. And then you also need to provide a Windows account that the DMS can use to impersonate and access that network share that you got here, so that it can really upload those files to the cloud first before it can use it for restore. So now you provided the network share where DMS can find the backup files, and then you gave the Windows account, and then you're going to pick a storage account that I can really use to the DMS can really use to upload. So this is a storage account. And then in the advanced settings, you can really rename the database if the database name already exists. Because I already set up a migration, the database name already exists. So I'm going to give a demo 2 or something right now, and then you just save. So let me go back to the screen again. So basically what you are telling the DMS is that, pick up the backup files from this location, use this Windows account and impersonate it and read the backup files from here and upload to a blob storage here. And then from there, restore onto a target managed instance, which you provided in the previous screen. So that's all you are saying. Now again, we are going to be validating all these settings just to make sure that you have everything is in place. And then simply the next step is that you are starting your migration. Start migration, and then you just simply would hit a run migration activity. So what I already did is I just wanted to show this experience to you at first, but I already established a migration project for us. So let me show you that. I'm going to close all these windows now. And then I'm going to go back to the specific project, which is WWI imports DB migration. This is the project which is currently running, and I'm going to click on that. This is a WWI database that I'm doing it, and there is a transaction log backup which is already restored. That means it already restored a full backup, and it also restored a transaction log backup that I already provided in the SMB network share that provided. So if you go back to my SQL Server instance here, these are the 2 backups that I already took and then put it in the network share here. Maybe I'm accessing, let me go back to this VM here. And then if you look at this site here, these are the backup folder where these are the 2 backups that are already available, and the DMS already used them. And this process continuously exists. During this time, your downtime is not started yet. So you can still go back to your source and then make all the changes that you need and then everything. So if you really go to your the VM that I'm hosting the application here, you can really access the tides and everything. So your on-premises application is still up and running. The downtime is not started. So we already established a database migration there, but we're not really calling out a cutover yet because we really want to migrate the application as well, right? So let's do that. To really migrate the application, what you need to do is you need to stop all the incoming traffic that is coming into the application at first, and then make sure that you take the final log backup. So I'm going to be taking the final log backup right now, going into my SQL Server box here, assuming that I stopped all my traffic. So this is my backup number 2. So let me do that. The backup is done. Now I'm going to do the application migration, and I'm going to change the connection string, right? So for doing the application migration, the next step is that I want to go back. There is a tool called migrate to Azure App Services. At first, just like how you assess your databases, you also need to assess your application at first. So let me put my application information here, so that this is a public URL that my application is being referenced, and it is telling me that the specific frameworks that are being used, the web server that is being used, and whether it is ready to migrate to Azure Web App Service or not. So everything looks okay. Even if I got more details here, it also gives you more information in terms of encoding, in terms of mobile, in terms of all the other components. Also, it gives you the relative readiness of migrating this application to Azure Web Apps, which is a platform as a service on the cloud. So everything looks okay. So I'm going to be doing start migration now. For that reason, you would be downloading a migration assistant tool onto the web service to migrate your application. So which I already did. So let me go back to my application server here. Let me minimize this one, and then let me minimize. Let me go back to this service again. So I'm going to a little bit minimize this window, or maybe I'm going to close the application here. So this is the Azure Web App Service, that the tool that I already installed. At first, what it will do is, as I launch this tool, it will detect automatically the specific web services that are being installed on this. So it already detected that there is WWI app web server that is already being hosted on the on-premises environment. So I'm going to pick that because I want to migrate that. And then I'm going to go to the next step here. In the next step, it is essentially telling me, it is doing another assessment here just to make sure that everything is ready to do the actual migrations here. And I don't have any issues in terms of the TCP ports, site content site, and PHP versions. Everything looks, all the rules looks really green for me. So I don't have any warnings either. So it is all ready to go to web app service. The next step is, I'm going to go to the next step here. And in the next step, I'm going to be uploading the project information to the Azure Migrate project that I really talked about. So I'm going to be going to the next step. And then here, you would want to provide a specific resource group or use the existing one. So I put like a wide world imports, and then also the destination site is wide world imports as when it is migrated to the Azure portal. Choose a region and also skip the database here, because I already set up a database migration using the Azure Database Migration Service, so I don't need to really migrate the database as part of, or the need to configure the database connection as part of this migration of the application. So I just use the option like skip database setup, and then you just simply hit a migrate button here, right? Um, but I already did the migration for us, so I'm going to go back to my application here, which is like wide world imports, which I already migrated to. This is the resource on the Azure portal. Before I launch the application, there are two things that I need to do. I need to cut over my database migration, and then I'm going to change the connection string, right? So for that reason, I want to go back to my DMS service. Before I go to the DMS service, remember that we took a final log backup, which is log backup 2. I want to make sure that that is also being restored in the DMS service. So I'm going to go to my DMS service here. Where is my DMS service here? Yep. Or I can go back to the DMS service here. So now I'm going to use the this one. This is the service that where I installed. I'm running the migration here, as you see, WWI. Now, if you look at this, transaction 2 is also restored. That means whatever the last transaction that you took, the backup that you took, that is also restored. That means all the transactions before you really migrated your applications are up to date onto the target. They are all restored. Now I'm going to do a migration cutover. So I'm going to do a start cutover button here. I simply confirm and then just apply. So now it is going to bring the target database online. So if you really, while it is doing, if you really look at it, the actual downtime that you got is only the time where you stop all the incoming traffic that is coming into your application, and the time it took you to migrate to the application using our tool, very simple tool, and the time it took you to take the final log backup, and time it took to restore. That is the only time that your migration, typically less than 15 minutes actually. So while that is happening here, the next step is that I'm going to go back to my application here. Okay, so here is the application which I already migrated actually. Now my next step is that I need to change the connection string. So I'm going to go to edit option here, and then I'm going to go to config file where I can see the connection string. Yep, here we go. In the config section here, as you see here, I already updated my uh, the database server name as managed instance server, where we really migrated our database, and I provided the initial catalog, which I called out as the cutover now. I provided user ID and password. So now the connection string is also changed. So basically, what happened is that our database is running on a managed instance, and then our application is also running on the Azure Web Apps. Now I'm going to be launching my application to see if the application is going to come up and running on the Azure. So I'm going to use this link here, the URL link, and then let's look at, boom, the application is now up and running on the Azure. Basically, both application is running on the web app service and as well as the database, which is running on the SQL PaaS service, Azure database managed instance. So that way, we are able to migrate both application and as well as database to the Azure. So basically using our tools, starting from Azure Migrate, where you we go and discover our environments and then find out the application dependencies. And then we use the DMA tool to do the database assessments. We find out the readiness. We use the DMA tool to find the SKU recommendations for the managed instance. And then we provisioned the managed instance. And then we also used the web app service migration assistant tool to assess and as well as the migrate the application. And then we simply change the connection string, and then the app is up and running on the Azure. Um, with that, I'm going to be concluding my demo, and then I'm going to switching back to my slide deck here. So to conclude this session, I'm going to introduce you to the roadmap. So at first, I'm going to be talking about some major investments that we made in the FY20 H1. The main call out is that we came up with a DMS hybrid service, and we released it for public preview. Especially with the cloud DMS service, you need to have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises environment and Azure. That can be done either through express route or VPN connection between Azure to public or to your on-premises environment. But in case if you don't have a site-to-site connectivity and you still want to migrate to the Azure, or you have a site-to-site connectivity but the bandwidth is pretty low, then that is the time that you can really leverage the hybrid DMS service, so that you are essentially installing the DMS worker in your on-premises environment itself, so that you don't have to deal with that site-to-site connectivity. So we published some documentation on that, and then please go through this and then see if you can leverage hybrid DMS service for some of those migrations that you are doing it. And then if you look at the future roadmap, we're going to be heavily investing on the SQL VM migrations. We are going to be coming up with a SKU recommendations for SQL VM that really help you to rightly size your VM that really meet your performance and scalability requirements for your workloads. And then we're also providing the online migration experience for the SQL VMs as well, so that you can really minimize the downtime migrating to the SQL VMs. And then we're going to be further integrating the assessment experience and migration experience into Azure Migrate itself, so that you don't have to really juggle between the multiple services and multiple tools. Today we use multiple tools because they're not tightly integrated in a single service. Going forward, we are really investing on Azure Migrate to really have a full seamless integration of all our tools into that particular service. And then we are also trying to simplify your migration experiences by bringing the migrations into the client tools like Azure Data Studio and as well as SQL Server Management Studio, so that you can simply go and then launch migrations from those tools that you are very familiar with it. That way, your migrations are going to be much more simple in your future. So with that, we gave a bunch of session resources that you can really learn more about some of the tools that we shared today. So these are the AKA links that you can easily remember and then bookmark. So please go through some of these links and learn more about migrations, and let us know if you need any help in the migrations area. With that, we are going to be concluding this session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Raj.